I'm so excited today to welcome our guest, Jennifer Francis. She's the mother of Hayley Hallam, and she's the author of A Hug Through the Air and A Christmas to Remember. And I invited Jennifer on the podcast today because she has an incredible story that started from tragedy and leads through a triumphant life. And she has been able to graduate her grief in a most beautiful, meaningful way. Jennifer, thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It truly is an honor.
So please describe Hayley. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, Haley was your typical toddler in some ways, but as you know, all of the kids are always different, right? But she was your typical toddler in one way in particular. She was so busy all the time. She always had something that she was doing. And so there were so many times that I can remember, telling her, can you come give me a hug? Because I needed all the hugs all the time. And she just didn't have that kind of time to stop what she was doing to give me a hug. So the thing that I really remember the most about her is the bond that she and I kind of created together in that exchange where I was asking her for a hug and she was far too busy doing what she was doing, and we kind of created a bond even back then. And it was our thing. She would grasp her hands to her chest and point to the air, and we called it a hug through the air. So we could stay connected even when she was too busy to stop what she was doing to come give me a hug.
That's a beautiful memory of her. So if you don't mind, please go back and tell us your story. Tell us what happened.
So, Haley was the light of my life. I was a stay-at-home mom and wife to my husband Troy. And in 2011, my husband took a couple days off of work, and we decided that we were going to go up to Erie, Pennsylvania. Haley loved playing with rocks. And I had heard that there was this beautiful sort of like this beautiful sort of substance up in the Erie, PA area, and they called it sea glass or
Mhm.
glass rocks.
Mhm.
So we had planned on taking her up there to look for these glass rocks, but tragically, we never made it to Erie on that vacation. On August the 26th, 2011, we were driving past the Grove City exit, and my husband must have lost control of the car somehow, but we ended up in a car accident that took the life of Haley and Troy. And I don't remember the accident. I woke up in the hospital either that day or the day later. I don't know. And they had told me what had happened in the hospital.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your losses, the loss of your husband and the loss of your daughter. So, how did you process that?
I mean, it was difficult. But I can remember when they told me in the hospital, I can remember my mind going to, okay, how am I going to survive this, and how am I going to make this life into something that allows them to continue to live. That was very important to me at the
Mhm.
time. First of all, trying to make sense of it, trying to find something positive to
Mhm.
grasp onto and hold on to that would also allow them to live on as well.
So, tell me about your grieving process and when the ideas started coming, or had they always, come as far as how do I keep their memory alive?
I can remember I never went back to our the house that I lived in. I went straight from the hospital to my parents' house where I stayed, and my husband's family was just amazing for me in that time, because they did everything that needed done with my house until I could sell it. They kept it clean. They got all of our belongings and the movers and everything. They coordinated all of that so that I never actually had to go back to the house. So I was staying at my parents' house following the accident, and I remember telling my mom, I want to do something where Hayley can continue to live on and help others who are feeling this darkness that I feel right now. I want people to know that it doesn't always have to be darkness. And I almost wanted to tell myself, it doesn't have to be dark. Like, there can be a hope in this and a light in this. And I wanted to allow Hayley to be that hope for me and for others. So I had asked my mom, how can I create this idea of a connection that transcends heaven and earth? And it was actually my mother that reminded me that Hayley and I shared a hug through the air even when she was on this earth. So I decided to kind of tell her story through that bond that we shared.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing. So how was the process of writing the book? I would imagine that the process of writing the book was a healing tool as well, because one way that you can get through grief is to get in the midst of creativity, where you lose, a sense of time, you lose a sense of everything else but what you're creating. Was it similar like that for you?
Yeah, in one sense, it did take my mind off of the grief, but it's strange because in another sense, it was really exhausting.
Mhm.
Like, I have been a writer all of my life. But writing A Hug Through the Air and A Christmas to Remember, um, it didn't necessarily come super easy to me. The words may have come easy, but working on the project was more exhausting for me mentally than I can really describe. But once it was completed, like, it was just this feeling of, of hope and in a sense that, she's still here.
So proceeds from this book go to a foundation, correct?
That's correct.
So tell me about the foundation and what it does.
I started the Haley Hugs Initiative. It's kind of been an evolving thing. It started with A Hug Through the Air, and I knew that I wanted to use A Hug Through the Air to help comfort other families that were feeling what I was feeling. So we sent the book out, and people donated money to have the book sent to other people, and we sent it out all over the country and got such amazing feedback on it. But then I always knew that I wanted it to be something more than just the book. So I came across a giant stuffed animal, and I was thinking, how amazing would this be to pair up with a stuffed animal and give it to hospitals where women had suffered from miscarriage, and have something that they could hold on to and hug onto as they grieve that loss. And then my book could be the component that maybe showed them, a little bit of hope, and that we can still remain connected. And so the Haley Hugs Initiative has kind of evolved into this organization that gives out what I call Haley Hug bundles. And it includes a copy of the book and a stuffed animal. And we give it out to people who are families who are experiencing grief, and hospitals where they may have a grief situation.
So how do you get them into the hospitals, or how do the hospitals get in touch with you?
I am working with hospitals in the area, and I just give them a steady supply. And when they need more, they call me. I'm working with area hospice centers as well, where they are provided. But we're always looking for places to donate. So just have to get a hold of me somehow, and we can add anybody to the list.
That's a beautiful thing that you're doing, because miscarriages so many times, and I lost my son at 29 days. He lived, although I never got to hold him. Um, uh, you leave the hospital empty-handed. That is, you went in, pregnant. You went in as two and you leave as one, and it's so painful. It's so painful. So that's beautiful to have something to hold on to have something to hug when you
I
need to love and nurture.
I think that it's interesting that you said that about miscarriages in particular. When I was starting the Haley Hugs Initiative, I felt like I really identified with women in particular who had miscarried a child. Maybe not necessarily so much as people that had lost a child like I did, but I felt like I identified with women who were miscarrying because, as I said, when I left the hospital, I didn't know when I was in the hospital even where I was or what had happened. And so when I left the hospital, I had this ache, like this indescribable ache in my arms because my arms were leaving empty. Like my daughter, I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom. She was everything to me. She was always with me. And here my arms were empty as I left this hospital. And so I really identified with women who had suffered a miscarriage, thinking that they were going to be leaving with their arms full and their arms were now empty. And I thought that the stuffed animal would give them something to hold on to so that their arms weren't empty.
That's beautiful. So now you have a Christmas to Remember. So tell us about that book.
So it just kind of is a continuation of my daughter's story, and it tells about how we celebrate differently, how I envision that my daughter is celebrating where she is at, and how I am celebrating down here on Earth. But Christmas seems to be one of the hardest times of the year, if not the hardest time of the year for people experiencing grief. So I really wanted to speak to that need when I developed that book.
So how did you get through those Christmases at
Um,
first?
and I know there's no wrong or right way
No.
to grieve, but for me, the initial Christmas we actually went to Florida because I didn't want to be reminded that it was Christmas, and um, palm trees and the ocean doesn't exactly say Christmas. But then on from there, I started to find ways, and my family started to find ways to include Haley in our Christmas traditions. Right now, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she hangs the first ornament on our Christmas tree, and it's one of Haley's ornaments.
Oh, that's a beautiful tradition. That's one of the things I talk about is sometimes you have to, give up some traditions because they're just too painful, but you can create new ones that are meaningful. And you have to anything that you're feeling during the holidays is okay, because your goal is to just get through each day, get through to the next day, right? And so you do it the way that you need to do it that's best for you.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even get through each day. Sometimes it's just get through each second and whatever you can do to get through each little second.
Good point. Great point. So let's talk about your journey back to living again, because you do have a 5-year-old little girl now. You have remarried. Have you not remarried? And you have a little girl. And so how was that journey back to opening your heart back up to the possibility of love and life and children again?
Well, I am so lucky because my grief journey really coincides with that journey altogether. It came about because my husband, my current husband, is actually the illustrator of my book. We were high school sweethearts, and I knew that he was a great artist. So when came up with the idea that I wanted to create this children's book, I approached him to draw the children's book for me. And in working on the book together, we rekindled and started a relationship. And eventually, a couple years down the road, I think it was like a year and a half after the book was released, we ended up getting married.
Oh, what a beautiful story. It wasn't like you were looking for it, but it was, but I love the fact that so many people choose to close their heart, choose to close that part of their life down because the loss was so painful. How do you know how you kept it open?
I don't. I mean, I think the most important thing about what you just said is to choose. Like it really is a choice, and you can choose to live. I mean, you can choose to do things however you want to do things, but you can kind of choose to live in that darkness, or you can choose to allow yourself and give yourself the permission to have happiness, and through your happiness and through your life, the life of the loved ones that you lost can live on.
So, obviously, because you've written a book about your daughter, Hayley, and obviously because you have Hayley's uh, charity, you talk about her a lot. Was it hard to talk about her at first? Or was it something that you were like, I'm always going to be talking about her. I'm always going to be remembering her with love. I'm not going to go back to the pain of that day. I'm going to take the goodness and the gift that was Hayley.
Yeah, I mean, even though sometimes it's hard to relive memories, I always wanted to be able to keep her alive. So I welcome people to tell me stories about her and tell me stories about my old life, because that allows her to stay alive, even though sometimes it is painful.
What advice would you give to other women who might seem stuck or who might be trapped in that pain? Can you offer any encouragement or any tools that maybe that you use that you they could put in their toolbox?
I think that there's no right or wrong way to do it. We're all just really trying to do what we have to do to survive. But what has helped me personally was making purpose out of tragedy, and finding a way that my family could help other families. And through that, I found a way to really keep them alive in my life. So I think that when we bless others, it really can make everything better all the way around.
So Jennifer, how can we get a hug through the air or a Christmas to remember?
A Hug Through the Air and A Christmas to Remember will both be available on Amazon shortly.
Okay.
Currently, A Christmas to Remember is available on Amazon, and right now, A Hug Through the Air is available by going to hayleyhugs.com and clicking through. And currently, all proceeds from A Hug Through the Air benefit an organization called the Warren Christian Apologetics Center.
Okay, wonderful. Jennifer, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And thank you for sharing your pain, but also thank you for sharing your bright light because your bright light together, you and Hayley are co-creating something beautiful to help other people in this world.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.